All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this next entry in the Masterclass series. My name's Ethan, and I'll be taking you through the content today, which is going to be talking about automations. So first, let's quickly cover what exactly it is that we're going to talk about. So the general theory, as it were, is going to be things you can achieve with Sybiz Vision when you're not at your desk. So in theory, things where you don't necessarily have to press a button. I'm going to put the asterisk up immediately, that basically everything we talk about is in some way going to lean heavily into the breakpoints module, and what you can do with it in the, we'll call it semi or fully automatic sense. To that end, if you don't have the module, this may be some consideration if you've been thinking about getting it. And if you already do have it and maybe you're not doing some of these things or you want to do some of these things, might give you some ideas. Just to also clarify quickly, the goal here today is less to show you how to do these things, because a lot of the ideas that we discuss are going to involve programming. They're going to involve code. So I don't want to dive too deep into the technical aspects, because that's obviously not what a lot of people here today do, but more provide ideas of what's possible. Because if you know what is possible, then you can talk to your business partner, you can talk to us in some fashion, and you can get it implemented, because we don't want you to not use Vision to the best of its abilities. Let's also quickly define automation. So what I'm talking about when I say the word automation in the context of today's presentation. So it's still something where you're going to need human input to set it up. Vision does what it tells, what you tell it to do. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words. It only does what you tell it to do. So you're still going to need to tell it to do these things automatically. You're going to need to define some logic. You're going to need to say, okay, this is what I want it to do. You're going to say what's going to occur. And also in almost all of these cases, in at least a minor degree, there's going to need to be some code written to make that automation work. And the slogan, as it were, that we come up with, which we say all the time, because frankly it's true, if you can describe it, it can probably be done. The limit is far more your imagination than the actual program itself, more often than not. Of course, there's exceptions, but more often than not. A question that came in before the webinar was, do you have to be a programmer to set up these automations? The answer in truth is yes. To address that question very directly, the point that I will make, and we'll sort of go through some of this today, is that some automations are definitely easier to set up than others. So, some automations might be, many hours of coding and laboring over your code and so forth. Some might be a couple of lines, and then a lot that's done on the Vision front end. So again, it's very much it depends on exactly how much skill needs to be brought to the table, but almost all of it is going to, at least even if it's in a minor degree, involve programming skill. And also we're defining automation here, at least primarily, as something that could occur overnight, away from one's desk. Or maybe while you're at your desk, but without your input, something that's happening every 15 minutes, for example. But anyway, now we've got that definition out of the way, let's discuss a few ideas. And these are the ideas that we're going to just quickly run through today to varying levels of depth. The first is something like a scheduled report. The classic is, on the first of every month, the boss wants a P&L. That's it. Just first of every month, you want a P&L. Now, maybe you do, maybe you don't, because you might want to, finish up the postings for the last month or something else. But maybe there's some report you want every week, every month, whatever the case may be. Credit management. This is a good one that I've seen implemented on at least a couple of sites. The idea of managing the ability of a customer to spend more when they haven't already paid their bills. Reminders. So this might be, but this could be anything really. Could be an email, could be a text message, pay bills, put in your timesheets, that sort of thing. And this could be done without any human intervention at all. And lastly, product management. This one's a bit more esoteric, as it were, but we'll go through a little bit of the process that could be set up in Vision. In regards to synchronizing some sort of file that you receive from a supplier, product manager, that sort of thing, and just punching that into Vision automatically through code as opposed to necessarily doing manual work. So we'll start with the first one on that list, which is scheduled reports. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2023, but maybe wrong, we added a new feature to the report sets function in Vision called scheduled reports. So it would let you, against that report set up a schedule. So that might be once a month on the first of the month. That might be every second Tuesday, whatever the schedule may be. And then that schedule is set up to output, whether it's to email to a specific file. So that might be a network drive, a OneDrive on your local machines, or just go to the printer. The printer I wouldn't see as frequently. But that schedule, it doesn't automatically happen. You can set up that schedule and then it just out on its own, it does nothing. So the question must be asked, okay, we've got this report set, we've got this schedule. You could do it manually. There is a screen that shows all the reports that are ready to go. But I mean, that's kind of a bit rubbish because you don't want to do it manually. That's the point of scheduling it. So we could do it automatically, of course. So broadly speaking, this is the process to set up that process. So the first is we're going to want to create that report set with the relevant reports settings and attach a schedule that is commensurate to the frequency that you want to see that report outlaid. So, you might have a daily report, for example, that is outstanding orders. You could have a monthly report that's P&L, trial balance, a couple of other things. The next thing is we're going to want to have some code written. So this will almost usually be your business partner. They're going to write some code to fire off those scheduled reports in line with your desired logic. So you might have a very, very simple logic, which just says every time the report's ready to go, fire it. Or you might have a more complicated piece of logic where you want some more very specific things to occur. And then finally, we're going to schedule the task. Now, I'll get a bit into what this means, but essentially we're going to write that code and then we're going to schedule that code to run automatically. So first things first, the actual schedule. So this is in the report set. So this is if you go to most of the ribbons in Vision, and then towards the right of the ribbon, there's a button called report sets, and you can set these up. So I've got a very simple example here, which is a balance sheet, P&L, trial balance, and then creditor and debtor aged balances. And then that fires off all in one file. So then we've got that set up, we've selected some options, filtering options, whatever the case may be. And then we've got that scheduling tab. So we can define a schedule. So I've got a monthly schedule there, which looks like this. So in my case, it's the first Tuesday, I've said, every 1 month. Then I've got a start. So, you might not want this to run for a couple of months. And then we've got output type, and I've said PDF. So then we can set up an email, which can say, well, whatever you want it to be. And that's setting that report set up. I'll call it ready to go. So right now it's raring to go. It's going to be scheduled to run on the 21st of April. It's not going to do anything just yet. So even the 21st of April is going to hit, nothing's going to happen. So now I couldn't really think of a good slide to say coding occurs, but coding occurs. So this, your business partner will go away. You'll say, I want this to happen. They'll go, yep, no worries. And they'll go write a breakpoint. So in this example, they're going to use something what's known as a command line breakpoint. The short version of what that means is it's code that can run outside of Vision a bit more flexibly without being inside the Vision program. So most of the breakpoints that we have for those of you who aren't familiar, they're run on specific things occurring inside Vision. So it might be before customer save. So before you save a customer, run this code. It might be after sales order process. So after a sales order is processed, run this code. These command line breakpoints, they're more flexible. They occur outside of Vision at a time of choosing. Also, just to clarify, this code could be 3 lines. So this could be a really, really simple piece of code because a lot of that logic is being handled. I'll just kick back a slide. A lot of that logic that I was talking about before is being handled here in the report set. The schedule's already done, what the email looks like. So a lot of it's already handled. It could be 3 lines of code, which would take 5 minutes, maybe. But there could be more complicated logic that you request, so it might be more complex along those same lines. Then finally, the last step is to schedule the task. So some of you might be familiar with this, some of you might not. This is actually a Windows utility called Task Scheduler. So you'd ideally place this, what we call task, on a computer that doesn't get shut down. This will likely be your SQL server, could be a terminal server, but again, whatever the case may be, somewhere where it's going to be running overnight. And in this task, you would have that little piece of code I was talking about to run your reports. So this task might get scheduled to set up once a day. So it runs once a day. It says, do I have any scheduled reports that I need to process? Yes or no? If yes, go generate them, send off emails to whoever needs them. If no, do nothing. And that's it. You've just automated your report sets. Now you might also want to be run some manual reports, ad hoc as you need them. But if you've got some simple reports, a report set that you do want every month, the first of every month, 100% of the time, you run this report set and you send it off to, Joe, Bill, and Sally. Don't need to do that manually. Have the server do it behind the scenes, set up some simple code, go for it. We'll move on to the next example now, which is credit management. So, this is a common issue, I would imagine, for more organizations than it isn't, for at least a minimal number of people. It's always the small number of people doing the wrong thing. Non-payment. It's annoying in and of itself, but from a Vision perspective, it's not necessarily easy out of the box, I'll say, because of the manual labor required to then track, okay, this person's tardy in payments. Oh, so I've got to set stop invoices on them because they're tardy in payments. Oh, no, hang on, I forgot to do that this morning because I went and got a coffee and forgot. And now they've come in and racked up another couple of grand in bills. Because the person at the front desk taking sales, they're not checking whether they've got overdue payments or not. That's much of a muchness. So broadly speaking, some scheme by which to automate a process, because that'd be great. Then the person at the back doing the accounts doesn't need to think about it. The person up the front doing the sales doesn't need to think about it because they're already on stop invoices or stop orders or whatever the case may be. And that's it. So let's theorize a process by which this could be achieved. So the first thing you'd need to do is define a logic by which what blocked means to you. So for you, it might be that they can't have new orders, they can't have new deliveries, they can't have new invoices. For some people, it might just mean no deliveries or invoices, and they can still put orders through. What blocked means to you is going to be different for every organization. So you've got to come up with that logic by which a customer is blocked. Then also you've got to define what you mean by unblock. So, okay, blocked might be you have any overdue bill. Unblocked might be as simple as you have no overdue bills. Or it might be that you have no overdue bills within the last 2 months. So if to use the aging terms, you might say age 1, that's fine, you can be okay there. Age 2 and beyond, that's a problem, and that's when we're blocking you off. So again, it comes up with that logic of what you mean by these terms. And then of course, we actually then need to write some code. So the business, you need to define your logic to your business partner, and then they'd go off and write some code to facilitate and implement. So for the sake of this presentation, let's just assume a few logical constructs, because again, the scenario in your particular instance is going to be really unique. You're going to need to come up with all the conditions, the logic, and so forth. But obviously, I want to actually give an example. So let's just come up with a few assumptions. Let's just say, to start with, all customers are on monthly trading terms. For us, what blocked means is that they have any outstanding item that is age 2 or greater. So if they've got something that's outstanding and it's gone 1 month and then 2, congrats, you're blocked. We're going to define blocked as meaning that they're going to be stop orders, stop invoices, and stop deliveries. Now, I'll make the asterisk that the reality is you probably wouldn't want to stop invoices if they've already had the goods delivered, because they've already got the goods. You need to get the money out of them. But again, for the sake of simplicity, for an example, we're just going to say, yep, our blocking mechanism is just stop everything, basically. And then finally, the customer will be unblocked upon payment of all of their age 2 or greater, I said invoices, but any items. So as soon as the age 2 or greater outstanding items are cleared, no worries. If you've still got age 1, that's fine. But all the age 2 ones are gone, cool. You are unblocked. You may proceed to order and get billed once more. The final thing is that customers will never be manually blocked. So we'll never be manually changing stop orders, stop invoices, stop deliveries. We'll use some other mechanism. If there's some exceptional circumstance, maybe we'll deactivate them or we'll have a separate construct there. But for our purpose, we're never going to manually block someone. So how do we achieve this? The answer generally is going to be through a number of breakpoints, because the goal here is to avoid human interaction. As said, the webinar's on automations, so it'd be pretty rubbish if we just said, yeah, just do everything manually. So we're going to use a number of breakpoints here combined to create this automated process. And that's something I do want to get across as a concept, is the idea is it doesn't have to be one breakpoint. We can have multiple working in tandem, including the base software, because our point 1 here is actually just editing roles. As we said, one of our logical constructs is we don't want to manually block anyone, and hence don't want to manually unblock anyone. Therefore, we're going to need to edit vision roles accordingly to prevent that cross-pollination of ideas, because if we get our constructs mixed up, things are going to go wrong. Step 2 is we're going to have one of those command line breakpoints, so one of those scheduled tasks early in the month. So that might be the first day of the month, might be the 3rd day of the month, and we're going to just search the database for any customers who have those age 2 or greater invoices, and then we're going to place them on stops. So that'll be that stop orders, stop invoices, stop deliveries. And this will all occur behind the scenes. We don't have to do anything. It's going to happen at 2 a.m. on the 1st. Our server's going to run the code. It's going to do all the work. Done. And then finally, of course, we now need those breakpoints to unblock when they become relevant. So we're going to need something on a cash book, because once they pay their invoices, but it's also important to consider we might need some breakpoints in other places as well. For example, if we processed a customer journal because we decided to give them a break and just write it off the bad debts, well, they're clearing their outstanding items. So we need to make sure that breakpoints are in every location where we can unblock. And we need to say, okay, when they've paid off their age 2 invoices, their age 2 outstanding items, tick, you may have your stops removed. And that's it. We now have a scenario where we can automatically have people be blocked and then automatically have people be unblocked. And throughout this entire process, we have not manually touched those stops, but people at the front counter are going to, at every point in time, have an accurate representation of, pardon me, of whether someone can or cannot take new orders. And of course, we can also extend this idea. What I just described is a pretty generic sort of concept, but it's not without extension possibilities. And these are all automatic concepts that I've come up here. with here. So the first is some kind of automatic email. So if you get blocked, you get an email or a text message perhaps, and I'll come back to that, to say, hey, you just got blocked. You should pay your bills. You could also write up an internal email. So as a part of that breakpoint, which is blocking people, could come up with a list of who's gotten blocked, and then internally to a series of internal managers who might be responsible for sales or customer management, say, hey, y'all internally, here are the customers who got blocked. Maybe that's per sales rep. Hey, these are your customers that got blocked. You should chase them up so they can pay their bills. You could have a custom field against customers, which has a count of how many times they've got blocked. So, maybe if you get blocked once, who cares? If you get blocked twice, maybe that's going to trigger some alternative process where then a review occurs, because maybe their credit terms need to be reviewed. If they're not paying their bills for 2+ months multiple times, maybe they need to maybe they need to stop getting terms. If you're using CRM, we could have an automatic CRM task that gets created that's going to prompt internal staff to follow up. Some of you may have gotten some of those calls from us because that's something similar to what we do internally. Is we follow people up for payment. We do that through the CRM system internally in Vision. And that's, again, all automatic. We're not manually creating those tasks. So again, there's plenty of extension we can go with this sort of general idea. We've got this, and this is functional as a concept. And I emphasize a concept. Your logical specifics may be different. But there's so much more you can do. And that's again, another thing I want to get across is we're coming up with some generic ideas here. But if you go, oh, hey, what about this? Again, odds are it's probably doable. Let's move on before we get bogged down too much in automatic reminders. So one thing that has come up in conversations, at least I've had with clients frequently, is the idea of something has occurred or something is coming up and a customer or a supplier, we want to just send something out. We don't want to, it's not necessarily related to a transaction being processed, because if a transaction is being processed, that can just be a document output, like an invoice or an order or whatever. That's fine. But there's some other concept that comes up, becomes relevant, and we want to send a reminder out. So we've got ideas, but the goal is clear. We want to push out things to customers and suppliers. Now, before we go too deep into that area specifically, I just want to pivot quickly to SMS. This is something that got added to the software a couple of months ago. Yeah, a couple of months ago now. It's something that's accessible via breakpoints only right now. And eventually we do want to build some out-of-the-box functionality. But the key point that I wish to convey here is you can set up SMS in your software Vision right now today, as long as you have 2501 or greater. You've got to sign up for an SMS provider on your own Steam. So we're facilitating that SMS sending through the software. We're not an SMS provider in and of itself, but we do support, I believe, to my understanding, all the mainstream options. So here's just an example of the setup screen. So this is in, as you can see, the common settings screen, and down the bottom there's a new option, SMS settings. So Codosity is a good one, SMS broadcast, again, they're all pretty mainstream options. You get different options based on what provider you select, because different providers, unsurprisingly, have different requirements and how they interact with APIs and so on and so forth. And you can see that here. In one case, we've got an API key, other case, we've got a username and password. But broadly speaking, the point is SMS in the software. So if you want to send out text messages, it is something you can do right now. So then that bears the question, what can we do with this? The answer is real. It's really anything. I've come up with a couple of ideas here. Your invoice is due. So if you've got some terms, and they're 45-day terms, people forget about that stuff. So cool, at day 30, your invoice is due in 15 days. Again, could be some flexibility there is exactly what you do. Could be your order is ready for collection. You might have a concept by which if you allocate stock on sales orders, once all stock has been allocated, that's considered ready for collection. If you're doing pickups, could be that you pick the stock using sales picks. But whatever your logical construct is, once that condition is met, cool, send out an SMS to the customer, your order is ready. If you're a service customer, if you're doing service requests for people and you book appointments, you might have a scenario where you say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, your service has been booked. There's an appointment set, and you don't have to manually now type out, hello, Bill, your air conditioner will be serviced. Let the system do it for you. We love the system doing things for us. It's great. Another example I thought of was an internal one. Hey, you haven't submitted your timesheet for your jobs this week. You need to do that. Because again, instead of having to now chase everyone up manually if they haven't processed a timesheet, get the system to do it for you. And if they haven't, that's on them. Because now they've gotten something, they've gotten an SMS to their phone. The sky's the limit. I think that's, again, that broad concept is your imagination is going to be a limiting factor more often than the software. Again, there's also a consideration to be given. Some code is complex and there is a cost to these things. But if you want to get something done, it's almost certainly doable. So to that end, you can ask yourself, when might you want to flick off some communication to someone, whether that's a customer or a supplier or someone internally? Any scenario where you've got that, as I've written on screen, logically defined condition and a phone number, you could send them an SMS. Similarly, if you've got a logically defined condition and an email, send them an email. There is plenty of scope with which you can attack the idea. Moving on to our final idea from our original set of 4. If you've got suppliers, especially bigger suppliers, they'll very frequently, in my experience at least, they'll be able to send you some kind of product list. It might be some spec sheets, again, RRP lists, new product codes, whatever the case may be. But usually it's going to be, hey, can we get that in some big, big data format? Yes, here you go. Now, I don't think it's going to be a controversial statement if I say that we don't want to manually input all that. It's no one wants to. Yeah, you can sort of do, the import routines that we've got already in the system are, I think they're pretty good. And Excel's a pretty powerful tool in regards to, you can do VLOOKUPs and all that to, generally speaking, to get the data into the format that Vision wants it. But even still, maybe we could do better. If we're dealing with a really big supplier and they don't change their, what's the word I'm looking for, their file format. If they don't change their file format in donkey's years, maybe we could set up an automation to bring all that information into Vision for us. Well, there we go. Looks nicer this way. So let's just simple example. We want to edit on a product, a custom field, because the supplier is giving us daily an idea of their stock levels. So this might be a product that we don't stock, that we only order from the supplier when it is ordered. But we want to give our customers the idea of whether that's actually going to be something they can get in a short period of time. It might be something very large, like a forklift. We don't want to keep 3 forklifts on the floor of the warehouse. That's a waste. But the supplier does. So we want to know, okay, the supplier has stock today. So, yes, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, we can get that to you, within the week. Or no, they've got it on back order, or no, they're actually never stocking that model again. So first step is going to be the supplier is going to need an easily accessible, I'm calling it a product sheet. So CSV is a very popular format. You've all probably seen a CSV file in some regard, but it needs to be somewhat computer readable. That's the phrase I like to use, is computer readable. Because as I said before, you want to try and come up with a logical construct that doesn't need too much decision making, human decision making. So then we're going to create a breakpoint, and a breakpoint is going to fire overnight via that task scheduler concept that I came up with before. And it's going to read, it's going to download that product sheet from the web. So that's that concept of it being easily accessible. So the supplier might upload it into the same place every day. You know, it's www.supplier.com/product sheet. And if you know that every single time that that's going to be the same CSV file, download it. So we can download that product sheet. And then our breakpoint is going to read it. So it's going to go through all the lines and it's going to try and match products to what we've already got in Vision. So since in this case, we're only just trying to edit a custom field, we're going to only try and match. We're not going to try and add products. That's beyond the scope of our idea here. But we can loop through and we can say, okay, so if I've got, product one, yep, I've got product one in my system. And then I'm going to edit product one to say, yep, the stock level's now high or whatever the supply, however the supplier communicates it. So we're going to edit that custom field based on the idea. And we're going to save the product. But the key here is, as you'll note, this has happened overnight. In my little concept here, this is overnight. We haven't had to even think about it. We haven't had to even dream about it. Well, actually, we have dreamed about it because it's while we're sleeping. The key here is something, it's time, right? So now you might have a really cool routine. You might have made some kick-ass Excel macro that takes that supplier product sheet and spits it into a Vision import file. And that might only take you now 10, 20 minutes. And that's great, but that's 10, 20 minutes every day, or every working day at least. Over a week, that might be, almost an hour. That adds up really quickly. 52 hours in a year where you could have a computer do it for you. So saving time here is a key. Or alternatively, because it's going to take 20 minutes or maybe more if you don't have a good system set up to get this data imported, maybe this is just something you've put on the back burner. You've gone, well, it'd be really great to have that information in the system, but I don't have the time, nor do my staff have the time to actually put this information into the system. So now if the system's doing it for you, if a computer is bringing that information in for you, you've now got more information at your fingertips to make better decisions. And isn't that what we all want an ERP for, is to make better decisions, have good information, make good decisions. So that's the key 4 ideas. Now, I included a special 5th because someone asked, put in a question before the webinar started. And so the other day I just popped in a couple of extra slides to address this question because I thought it was a good one. The question was, could we automatically enter a purchase invoice into Vision based on the supplier sending that invoice to an email address? The question is specifically mentioned Outlook. I'm going to more generic it into an email address just because it's a much easier question to answer. And the answer is yes. It's not necessarily easy, but the answer is yes. And I wanted to address this question primarily because it also highlights some of the pitfalls potentially of automation. Why it's not necessarily going to be the answer in all cases, but it is often the case that it's possible, just not necessarily easy. So I've come up with a very off the top of my head theory. As I said, this was only yesterday that I actually put the slides in. I started thinking about it late last week, but as I said, very quick idea here. So I've got a very simple concept, not necessarily fully robust, but a very simple concept. And these would be the key requirements which would make the system that I've come up with work. The first is there has to be a consistent invoice format. So if this particular supplier, let's say we've got one big supplier, we want to automate all their invoices, but everyone else, they only get one invoice a month, whatever, don't care. So one big invoice. So it needs to be consistent because if they keep changing their format, it's no longer computer readable necessarily. If we're looking for a particular column name and they just change the name of that column once a week because they feel like it, Again, that would require human decision making, not ideal. We would also need to have a specific place to draw these invoices from. The easiest way to go about it is if there'd be a discrete email inbox, because we need to be looking for specific files. We need to look for this specific invoice or invoice set. And if we can't identify it amongst a group of emails that we receive, that may be trickier. Again, my concept's simple. So that's my idea there, is have a specific place. And finally, this invoice ideally should be in a computer readable format. If it's a PDF, that's somewhat trickier. Somewhat trickier for a computer to read. Again, not impossible, but trickier. And that's another key point of automation. The harder you make it for the system, the more complicated the code has to be, and ergo, the more of a cost it becomes to you as an organization to get that automation implemented. So the simpler you can make it, the less conditions, the more easy for a computer to understand you can make the process, the better. And that's why my simple concept has us getting these invoices as CSV files. Is that realistic? Probably not 100%, but for the moment, let's just take that assumption. So here's, damn arrows. It looks nicer if you don't have the whole arrow come up at once. So here's my general concept of the workflow on the basis of that idea. So supplier's going to send that invoice, which is hopefully, again, computer readable, to a particular email inbox. So that might be, big supplier invoice at company.com, where you are company.com. Next, again, it depends on how often you'd be getting these invoices, but every hour, 15 minutes, whatever, you're going to run one of those breakpoints through Task Scheduler that I was talking about before, the command line breakpoints, and it's going to read unread invoices. So we're going to have some concept of what's read. So because we don't want to process the same invoice twice, that'd be wasteful. And we're going to read those unread ones. It's going to read the invoice, and it's just in case, we'll probably check it for validity. So there might be some particular format that this invoice is in that we expect it to be in. And we're going to say, yep, this is the correct format, tick, we can move on. If it is a valid format, we're going to save it into Vision. So personally, with these sorts of automations, especially when we're talking invoicing, I wouldn't process. I would still want that final bit of human, tick off to say, yes, I approve being invoiced, 100 grand or something like that. It still prevents all the data entry from coming in. So the data entry is done for you. It's saved in the system, but it just lets me personally have the final tick of approval. And then as the final step, we would have that routine mark the email as read. So I know like Gmail has a concept of, I think they're called tags. So we might say, okay, we might tag it as processed invoice. And then therefore unread means doesn't have that processed invoice flag. Broadly speaking, that's a somewhat simple concept. It does have a lot of reliances though. The biggest one that I had came up with was the fact that I'm getting sent an invoice in CSV format or something similarly computer readable, which is again, not a very common scenario. More commonly, you would have a somewhat more, I'll say, complex, robust system. So usually it's, in my experience at least, you're going to use something like optical character recognition. So this might be, there's a lot of AI tools these days that are doing it. Back in the day, I remember when I was a kid, there were little bits and bobs that would try and read things. And then that would read any invoice that comes in. And instead of having it in a computer readable format, it would just say, okay, this piece of software knows that something that looks like, purchase invoice, product ID. Yep, that's probably going to be the product thing, and we're going to try and put it in. And this would, in theory, mean that you end up with being able to process more invoices than not. This is well beyond scope, though. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is well beyond the scope of what we can do more easily. The point that I'll make, though, is that you don't necessarily have to fully automate something. I've mentioned a lot of pitfalls there. But maybe there is something that we can do. So maybe we could do something like, instead of a fully automation, maybe we could commission like an import routine. So if we can copy paste all the lines from our invoice into, say, an Excel file, maybe we can then get an import routine to do it for us. It's still human. It's not, again, it's not as automated, but it might cut out a bit of the data entry if needed. We'd still need a consistent file format. That's true. But maybe we're massaging the data of the invoice that we get in and then importing it. And if that does require human intervention to make it a bit simpler from a code perspective, so be it. But again, there's pros and cons. And the more complicated we make it, the more it's going to cost, as said. So simplicity is key. And maybe in this sense, because we go, okay, fully automating this, somewhat complex, let's step back a bit and only automate some of the process. So that's another idea I want to leave you with. So what is the summary? I wanted to provide just a bit of scope of what's possible. I don't think I've touched even the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's, I haven't even touched the peak of the tip of the iceberg in regards to what is possible. But I'd like to think that I've provided at least a few ideas of the sort of thing that is doable. The key here is logical, consistent processes that do not require at least a lot of human decisions can very frequently be automated at least a little. Again, you don't necessarily, like I gave with my invoice example, you don't necessarily have to automate the whole kit and caboodle. Sometimes automating just a portion can still add a ton of value to your day. The message I'll leave you with is, like I said before, keep it simple. The more ideas, conditions, considerations, exceptions, I want to automate this, but if the moon's in a particular part of its cycle and if the bus driver had a tuna sandwich for lunch, the more you add, the more complicated it's going to be. And at that point, yeah, there's going to be greater costs. So keep it simple. And again, liaise, discuss, just scope with your business partner. Your business partner is there to sometimes to say no to you. To go, you've come up with a really complex concept. We can do something simpler. It's far more achievable. And we can implement this. It's not exactly what you want, but it's far more achievable. And you can work together with them to come up with a good solution. So if you do want to discuss this further, get in touch with us at sybiz.com. We've got the contact form there. You can also email at sybiz@sybiz.com. And we'll liaise with your business partner to start that process, and we can start talking about what breakpoints, what automations you can put in the software, and what the software can do for you. Because again, the goal of the Masterclass series is to help you get the most out of Vision, and we do very, very truly believe that automating at least some elements of your day-to-day business can add massive amounts of value. Very quickly, just because we do have a minute, were there any questions that came through during the presentation, Megan? I would imagine not, because I've gone through an absolute bucket of stuff.
No questions.
No worries. No, I do appreciate with you all. It's a lot to digest what I said, so I will invite you to go away and review. Thank you everyone for attending and listening to me blather on for 3/4 of an hour. And thank you also to Megan and the team for assisting with regards to getting the job done here. So thank you everyone, and I'll leave you to the rest of your Fridays. All the best for the weekend and take care. Ciao.